Good morning. Hey, if you are newer with us and you're unsure of where we're going to be starting today we are continuing our study that we've been doing for the past handful of weeks through the letters of John, the books of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Now, last week we finished up 1st John, and today we're going to get into the book of 2nd John. Now, as we dive into it, you may have kind of thought this or noticed it as we studied 1st John. 1st John doesn't read very much like a letter. It kind of reads and sounds more like a sermon. However, the books of 2nd and 3rd John, they sound more like letters, kind of the typical letter that you'd find or that you'd read in biblical times, more similar to like the letters from Paul and so forth. And so generally how these letters would work is they would be written by the writer, they would be sent, and they would typically be read in front of the church community, either by the person delivering it or by someone within that church. And so for this week and for next week, since we're dealing with two fairly short letters, but letters that do sound a little bit more like the typical letter that we would see elsewhere in the Bible, I thought it would be nice for someone to come and read these letters before us as a church. So this morning I have invited Pat Crosswhite and asked her if she would come and just read this letter to us as a church as we begin to look at it and study it a little bit deeper this morning. So would you please welcome up Pat?
Good morning. This is 2nd John. The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in truth, and not only I, but also all who know the truth, because of the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace will be with us from God the Father and from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son, in truth and love. I rejoiced greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. And now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I were writing you a new commandment, but the one we have had from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you would walk in it. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, and those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves, so that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward. Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting, for whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works. Though I have much to write to you, I would rather not use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to come to you and talk face to face, so that our joy may be complete. The children of your elect sister greet you.
Excellent. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Pat. I think it's helpful. I think there's multiple helpful ways to study Scripture, and I think one of them is like we do on a typical Sunday in kind of looking at it section by section or verse by verse. But I think it's also helpful to just read Scripture in just chunks at a time. Granted, these two letters of this week and next week are smaller chunks, but it's helpful just to read the whole thing at a time, and then we can dig further into it. Now, as we get into this letter, I think you may have noticed, and you may not have, but there are some parts of this letter that are a little strange. They're a little strange, and it almost seems as if John is teaching a message of like anti-hospitality. I don't know if you caught that, where he talked about don't welcome people into your home, don't greet them, and so forth. And in fact, as I was preparing for this, I read this in a commentary, and I thought it was really interesting, just kind of as a way to look at this. This commentator that I read, he spent some time talking about how 2nd John in these commentaries generally have like very little bit dedicated to them. Most of it's 1st John, and a little bit for 2nd John. He spent some time talking about how 2nd John has nothing new to offer that 1st John hasn't already said, and said better. He talks about how 2nd John is rarely preached on, rarely taught on, doesn't appear in any cycle of the common lectionary. It wasn't taught on by Martin Luther or John Calvin, who famously taught on 1 John. And then he says this, and this is a quote from it. He says, "Perhaps the unique feature of this letter is best left unheeded, namely the warning to not show hospitality or even friendliness to those who espouse false doctrine and do not walk in love. Shunning may still be a practice by the Amish, but it is not in good odor in modern society or modern churches. To be inhospitable and unfriendly is bad form. Incivility neither has nor needs defenders. In the face of it, normal human relations suffer. There is a sufficiency of bigotry and intolerance about, so that we do not need the second epistle to encourage it." Now, I found that very interesting, because now he does say positive things about the letter too. That's not the entire entry. But I found that very interesting as a way to look at this letter as something that someone who studied it and spent some of their academic time in it actually says, maybe don't preach on this. And so I think that there's some things he says that are true. That I absolutely agree with the statement that there's enough bigotry and intolerance and that there's no need to add to it. But I think we need to question, is that what John is actually intending here? And so let's dig into it and find out. So let's go back to the beginning and let's start reading through it together. 2 John chapter 1, well, 2 John chapter, the only chapter. 2 John verse 1, it says this, "The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in truth, and not only I, but also all who know the truth, because of the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace will be with us from God the Father and from Jesus Christ the Father's Son, in truth and love." So right from the beginning, we see the elder. We talked about this at the beginning of 1 John. This is most likely referring to John the disciple. And then he's writing to the elect lady and her children. Now there are some differing opinions here, but the majority of scholarship seems to generally agree that this is referring to a house church and its congregants. That is not actually likely writing to a specific person, but to a house church in Asia Minor, maybe Ephesus, but a house church and its congregants. And its congregants are the children. And so John starts with this greeting, and he says, "Grace, mercy, and peace be with us in truth and love." Now, if you read Paul's letters, if you read other letters, you may hear a lot of grace and mercy to you, but John says to us. So right off the bat, he is identifying himself with them. He's not saying for you and for me, he's saying for us as a whole. In other words, I am a part of you, and I'm asking for God's grace, mercy, and peace to be with us. And then he continues about talking about truth, this idea of truth and love, which we've been talking about for throughout all of 1 John, this relationship between truth and love. And he continues with a little bit more of this idea in verse 4. "I rejoiced greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. And now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I were writing you a new command, but the one we had from the beginning." Same phrasing as 1 John, the command you had from the beginning, that we love one another. "And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. And this is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in it." So again, we talked about some of your children, talking about people within the congregation. And he's talking about, he wants them to think about the relationship between truth and love that we've been discussing. But the reason he keeps talking about truth is it's important to have this truth in mind because the truth is what's going to keep them away from danger. I think that's the simplest way to put it. When we're talking about false teachers that have gone away from the church, that have come back and are trying to pull others away into these false doctrines about who Jesus is, the truth is what